What's up, wizards? It's Mtg. You know by now we like it in magic, all that stuff. Now today, another kind of light day of previews from War of the Spark. I think I only have like 7 cards to talk about, but it was more of like a quality over quantity issue today. Like 4 of the cards are rare we're going to talk about. One of them's mythic, so there's a lot of cool stuff to get to. Let's get through a couple of draft things first, and we'll talk about the big ones. Well, the final card spoiled yesterday was Dread Hoard Twins. This is 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 2/2 zombie jackal warrior. And when it enters the battlefield, you amass 2. And zombie tokens you control have trample. So it's another one of these, gives zombie tokens you control an ability and amasses. We've seen a few of these this set, and although I don't think this is the most impactful one, I do really like it for limited. Trample isn't necessarily the best ability to add on, especially when compared to abilities like Hexproof and Death Touch, like we've seen some of these other cards provide, but the rate is what impresses me here. It's kind of, it's easy to let this slip past you, but 4 mana for 6 power on 2 bodies is a really good rate. So that's one of the things that I like the most about the card. And hey, the token that you make has trample, even if you don't have, any other zombie tokens out or anything, or if all you're doing is amassing one big army, the trample might be relevant. If this puts +2 power on an existing army and gets you a 5 or 6 power army, well, suddenly the trample is very relevant. So there are plenty of things I do like about the card. I just really like the rate above all else. We also saw Tamiyo's Epiphany, which means yes, we also saw Tamiyo. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it. But Tamiyo's Epiphany is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for sorcery. Scry 4, then draw 2 cards. So it's kind of like Foresight, or Forsea? Yeah, I think it's Forsea. From way back in the day. A card that I did like, but the sorcery speed bugged me back then, and it bugs me now. I'm not sure this card really sees much play, because you can't play it at the end of your opponent's turn, or in response, trying to dig for a counterspell, or some other answer, I really think that does undercut the use a card like this could have. If you do have 4 mana on your turn to cast it, Scry 4 is an awful lot, and it does give you card advantage at the same rate as a card like Chemister's Insight, but there's no way in my mind it replaces Chemister's Insight, because Insight is instant speed, you get to cast it twice. This just looks like a fairly inconsequential card, but in limited, this might be pretty good in sealed, because it gets you a lot closer to the bombs that you're looking for, and lets you draw them too if you do happen to find them on the scries. As promised, the rest of the cards today are either rare or mythic, so we'll kind of start from the bottom, literally and figuratively, with Silent Submarine, Wakka. This is just 2 blue mana for a 2/3 vehicle that you crew for 2, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player or a planeswalker, you draw a card. This is a bit of a belated apology for Smuggler's Copter. It's like 2.5 years after the fact, but they definitely powered it down significantly. Most of the talk about this card so far on the internet today has been like how awful it is, and yeah, it doesn't look too good. Let me say that much, but at the very least, it is, protected from sweepers, sorcery speed sweepers at least, anything besides like Settle the Wreckage. It can be protected from sorcery speed removal like Lava Coil, so this does have a little bit of a niche as far as that goes, but, crew 2, it's got the same crew cost as its power toughness, so you're not really gaining anything when it does attack, and it actually has to get through for combat damage. Like, Better Ophidian looks way worse in 2019, It's just going to be tough to find this thing a home. I do think it actually looks a little bit better than a lot of people, because most people are just comparing it to Smuggler's Copter, which I think is hilarious, because there's so many people that are like, oh, this is so much worse than Smuggler's Copter, why would you do this? And it's so bad, it's a terrible card. And it's like, do you remember how much everyone complained about Smuggler's Copter for months? Like, there's no like happy medium apparently. The card is definitely no looter scooter, but it's not supposed to be, and we would all hate it if it was. So, just take it for the apology it's supposed to be and move on. But up next, let's talk about Spark Double. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 0/0 illusion, but that's not the end of the story. You may have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker you control, except it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature, and it enters with an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. And, one of the coolest parts of the card, it isn't legendary if that permanent is legendary. Prepare for trouble. Make it double. This card looks actually pretty decent to me, but it's going to require the right meta to actually be good, and that's where I have to kind of be a buzzkill. I'm not really seeing too many situations in which this card actually sees play, given that, like, it's not good against Esper, it's probably not good against aggro, because it takes a while to actually set up, like, good payoffs with this, but that said, let's talk about those payoffs, because there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with this. It's just immediately good with any walker or creature that combos with itself and is legendary. You know, it doesn't even have to be legendary, just creatures that combo with themselves or whatever. But if the creatures are legendary, then you can go like double Shalai and they protect each other, which seems good. You can also go like double Vanifar, which seems nice to have 2 birthing pods out at the same time. Seems very good. And there's plenty of walkers you can do cool stuff with too. Like I've heard people talk about the new Sorin. You know, you can actually use Sorin's ability to get this out of the graveyard and then copy Sorin. Well, seems nice, you know. Plus all manner of other dumb stuff, you know. Like one of the worst parts about Davriel is that it's a legendary, so you're only really going to get 2 damage a turn. Well, I guess Spark Double allows you to get 4 damage a turn with 2 Davriels. So there's that too. There's a lot of cool stuff brewing up in people's heads. It's also good for the Lumbering Battlement deck, I guess. You know, I'm kind of a proponent of that deck, and this goes right in. You know, it's another copy of Mirror Image or whatever. It's exactly what you're looking for in a deck like that. But just the ability to, you know, copy legendary stuff is actually really, really important. I can't tell you how many times I've been building decks, and I've wanted something exactly like this, more or less. You know, a clone that makes the legend lose its legendary restriction, and that's exactly what we got here. It costs a lot, and it doesn't actually target, you know, anything your opponents control, which kind of sucks. You know, it can only target stuff you control. The fact that you can't, you know, copy your opponent's stuff doesn't necessarily ruin the card for me. There's all kinds of weird combo-y applications. It just has to be fast and reliable enough to actually pull these things off in a consistent way, and at a point in the game where you're not just going to get like, you know, countered or run over before you can even pull off the interaction. But that said, there are plenty of cool things you can do straight away with this thing in the format. It's also cool to see like Double Mint Twins Jace on this artwork, you know. I like the back-to-back Jaces. It's cool. I rarely do I call Jace cool, but I'll give him this one. But on to some stuff that looks a little bit more playable in Standard, starting with Enter the God Eternals. This is 5 mana, 2 blue, and a black for a sorcery. That's bad. Enter the God Eternals deals 4 damage to target creature, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. Target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into the graveyard, and, if that weren't enough, amass 4. This kind of feels like an ultimatum to me, you know? Like it's not cruel ultimatum or anything, but it costs way less. And honestly, I know I said the sorcery speed was bad, but again, that doesn't entirely... It's one bad thing, but it doesn't ruin the card for me. In fact, if this was instant speed, it would just be like kind of off the rails. It'd be bonkers if it was. You do have to take up pretty much your entire turn and very likely tap out to actually cast this. And your opponent probably has to not be playing control. You know, this probably isn't very good against control opponents because it has to have a target to be cast in the first place, and that does hinder it a little bit. But if you're able to actually cast the card, it's just crazy removal that I kind of don't mind paying 5 mana for. Like, look at it as a 5 mana 4/4 that usually kills a creature when it enters the battlefield, and gains you 4 life. Like, the mill is just kind of okay. Like, I guess you get a mill out of it. I will say that we just saw Raise Boar yesterday, and it turns out we're going to see more of these gods, as if this card weren't any indication of that already. But all the gods tend, like, it looks like they're going to have this Raise Boar ability. So Mill might actually be kind of good, you know, if you've killed one of their Elder Gods and it's gone 3 under in the last couple of turns, well, the Mill will take care of that for you. So that the Mill is a little bit better in this format, is kind of what I'm trying to say here. Mill's a little bit more desirable because these gods are around, and they're probably going to see some standard play. So take that as you will. The mill is probably the least consequential part of it, but that on top of all the other gravy that 5 mana gets you, I kind of don't care that it's sorcery speed. A 4, you know, a 5 mana 4/4 that kills a guy is gonna that's a sorcery speed play, right? You know, at instant speed that would be insane. Plus like a random 4 life. Killing a guy gaining 4 life already kind of feels like a 2-for-1, plus you get the body. I like a lot about this card. And it does have to beat out other stuff, you know, at the 5-drop slot in this color combination. It's got to be worth playing in the format in the first place. Probably also requires a kind of mid-rangey format. But this will catch you up an awful lot against aggro. Kills Venerated Loxodon, kills Tempest Gen. Those are important things to be able to do right now. So I think the card definitely has more than a chance, just because all of the stuff it does is crazy and kind of equates to a 3-for-1 at the end of the day, if not a 4-for-1 if you want to count the mill. But speaking of gods and such, here's God Eternal Bontu. The Croc is back. He's 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 5/6 legendary zombie god with menace. Threw a keyword ability on him. And when God Eternal Bontu enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of other permanents, then draw that many cards. When God Eternal Bontu dies or is put in exile from the battlefield, you do the same thing you do with the pig. You may put it into its owner's library 3rd from the top. let me be one of the first to say, kind of have problems with it. I don't think this is a bad card. I actually think this is a rather good card. It's all about like whether or not a deck can actually take advantage of that enter the battlefield trigger to the fullest. It makes you sacrifice stuff if you actually want to get value out of it. And yeah, you can turn that into an upside in an Aristocrats deck. But I actually think there might be, at the end of the day, better sack outlets than a card like this. Although this does stick you with a big body on the battlefield, get you a bunch of value. And if you have a Midnight Reaper out aside from that, you get a bunch of drawn cards too. And that's only for sacking creatures. Note that you can sacrifice just like lands, like extra lands with this to kind of protect from flood. And then suddenly you've drawn, 2-3 cards if you've got a buttload of extra lands in the late game. And a 5-6 minutes that draws you 2 cards is good. Pretty much any point of the game. But again, where this is on the curve, it's likely to be countered. You could say the same thing about the pig. So, it's not really the best rebuttal in the world. Pretty much any spell can be counterspelled. But in a format full of Esper, we're looking for options that are specifically good against that deck. And I'm not sure that sacrificing a bunch of your own stuff, which probably won't have in the first place because you got Kaya's Wrath last turn, is probably not the absolute best way to go. And although I think that the resilience on the card is obviously worth noting, and I think that's going to be, on a lot of these gods, one of the best part of the cards. You can't even Vraska's Contempt this. It will come back, I think that makes these playable in and of it, just that ability. It makes all these gods like much more playable. But I'm really looking to see what other gods we get before I just go absolutely nuts, because I think in terms of total value and how much you can abuse the enter the battlefield trigger, I'm not sure this is going to be the best god. Although I will say, when comparing it to the red god, you do get immediate value out of this. Even if it gets killed, quote-unquote, immediately, you do still get some value out of it, which I think is important in comparison to the red one, which you do have to wait until the next turn for it to attack, or even if you have a Rhythm of the Wild, you still have to declare attacks, and it has to survive that interaction, that declaring of the attack step. So I think that if you're looking for immediate value, and often I am, this might be, in some ways, the better card, but you have to build your deck around it a lot more than you do a card like the Red God. So that's kind of a point against it. That said, if you build the deck exactly right, yeah, I think this card could do a lot of work for you. Actually, before I get off this card and go to the next one, just one more thing that occurred to me during editing. Mayhem Devil. I was looking at other cards from the set, and I think Bontu is actually just supposed to go with Mayhem Devil. You drop Bontu with Devil on the battlefield, and you sacrifice all your lands, and you hit them for a billion, I guess. You could actually hit them for like 6 or 7 pretty easily right there, so that's one thing you could do with the card, but people online have already mentioned World Shaper as well. Maybe this is what we're supposed to do with World Shaper, so that's a really cute interaction that might either be extremely powerful or just hilarious. One way or the other, I want to at least try it out. So I couldn't just get off this card without talking about some of the other cool things you can do and the interactions in the format. I think those are 2 of the coolest. But the last card of the day, so far at least, is the one we've all been waiting for. Here's Tamiyo, Collector of Tales. It's 4 mana, 2, a green, and a blue for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. Spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause you to discard cards or sacrifice permanents. If you +1 Tammy, you choose a non-land card name, then reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all cards with the chosen name from among them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. You can also -3 Tammy to return target card from your graveyard to your hand. A lot of action on this walker, and I think that it's really, really interesting. But maybe not the absolute best. Although there's so much that I like about it, I will say that the static ability, passive ability, whatever you want to call it, is a little bit narrow, and it is specifically going to be good against Grixis decks that run Thought Erasure and Duress after boards and all that. So it is a decent sideboard card in that scenario, but of course it keeps you from having to sacrifice stuff to New Liliana or Liliana's Triumph or other Edict effects and stuff like that. Eldest Reborn, another good example, Plague Crafter. There's a few in the format that might actually make this card relevant, again, post-boards. But here comes Ziggy to argue with me, and I do have to acknowledge he's got some good points, That +1 ability is a lot better than it looks in a format full of Scry and Surveil and a couple of other ways that you can monitor the first few cards of the top of your library, Even things like, say, Bolas's Citadel or Experimental Frenzy, if that's the route you want to take, will allow you to see the top card of your library, so it's not too hard to guarantee that you draw a card, although it is a bit of a non-bow with Experimental Frenzy and even Citadel. But the point is, there's plenty of ways to scry or surveil or otherwise fix the top few cards, so it's pretty easy to draw the card you want and name the card that you want. if you have smart information beforehand with that +1. Plus, it also like lets you just dump cards into your graveyard, which is really good with Narc Amoeba, Creeping Chill, Reanimator strategies, Jumpstart cards, all kinds of stuff. Makes the graveyard matter in this format. So I do like a lot about that first ability because it's kind of just like a Grizzly salvage, especially if you know a creature that you're going to be drawing into anyway. And by the way, that's significant with all these gods that we're seeing. Not only the pig, but, you know, Bontu, they all get put into your library third from the top when they die or get put into exile. So Tamiyo can draw them for you right away, and that's pretty cool interaction too. And I really like the regrowth ability. Even though it's like 4 mana for a regrowth, that's actually not the worst rate in the standard environment. That's not bad. And if you get multiple regrowths off of it, it's absolutely nuts. And it's any card, any old card, not a permanent, not a non-land permanent, not an instant or sorcery, any card that you want in the world, which means this has a bunch of Johnny applications and combo stuff that it might be able to do, because regrowth on a stick that you can use multiple times seems good, especially even possibly in like Nexus decks and stuff. You know, you'll take multiple turns, so you'll get multiple loyalty counters on Tamiyo pretty easily, at which point you'll get multiple regrowths pretty easily, which a deck like that could very much want. We've seen a few cards today that sort of rely on a mid-range format to perform at their highest level, and this is one of them, and I think that's kind of the theme from today. You know, Bontu and, you know, what is it, Enter the Gods or whatever it is, you know, the Dimir sorcery that kills the thing and does all the other stuff. Even that clone that we saw, you know, it denotes a mid-range format in order to really see the ceiling of its power level. But I'll say one more time before I get off this card, I got plenty of time to talk today. There's only a few cards to talk about, so I get to actually, you know, expand on things like I want to, but I don't want videos to be an hour long. But anyway, I do like this combos with itself. You know, it puts cards in the graveyard with its plus ability, gets them back with its regrow ability. And again, I think that regrow ability might be the key. But there's just so much card advantage on the Planeswalker period. You know, if you can guarantee that you'll actually draw a card with the plus ability, that's card advantage. And obviously the regrow ability is card advantage too. So this is an insane engine in and of itself, if you can keep it protected and on the battlefield. It's a great engine. So I respect a lot about the card, and I think there's a chance it'll see play. But again, I think a lot of the cards today, not just this one, require a mid-range format to perform. And that's it for now, at least. It's relatively early in the day, at least for me, as I'm recording this. It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually I try to record at like 6 or 7. I know that pushes the videos out later, but it also ensures that I get all the cards from the day in the one video. But I decided to go ahead and pull the trigger a little bit early on today's video because they really haven't previewed much, but some of the stuff they did preview is obviously worth talking about. So went ahead and got in early. If there's anything later on today, then I'll make sure we get that in tomorrow's video. So stick with us, subscribe if you're new to make sure you get that content and all the other spoiler content, deck techs, lists, all that stuff's coming up soon. So make sure you sub, hit the bell for the notifications, like the video if you enjoyed it, put me in more recommended feed, spread the spoilers around to more of the Magic community. That's important. Hit the link in the description to go to TCG Player. You want to pre-order any of this stuff, and some of it looks pretty darn good. So if you want to pre-order any of this, do any speculation, or just use TCG Player as a price guide, click the link in the description. They've also got sealed boxes on pre-order for under MSRP at this point. So all your War of the Spark needs, they got you covered, and they help sponsor your boy too. So help me out. Click the link in the description. Aside from that, if you really want to help me out, go over to the Patreon. You know I got a plug for it. I apologize. But it's a thing I got to do. It's part of my job. But for your $1 a month, that's all I ask. For your $1 a month, every 30 days or so, then I will let you vote on what decks you want to see all throughout the season, including the very beginning, which is really, really important as to like how we order the decks and how we decide what the community wants to see. So go ahead and get in there now if you've got $1 to spare. It would mean a lot to me. But aside from that, just let me know how you felt about these. There's not much to cover today, but there's a bunch to cover within the few cards that we actually got. So if I missed something, didn't bring an interaction up, any of that stuff, let me know down there in the comment section how you're feeling about it. But I guess I'm done for this one. Short and sweet spoiler video. It's good to have one of those every now and again. But in any case, I think I'm done for now. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.